Hey everyone, how's it going? We got another episode of the Survival Guide to Life. And this week we have Jeff Sutherland. Now, Jeff Sutherland is the father of Scrum and he's a doctor. And we welcome you to the show, Jeff. Um, you've had a remarkable journey from flying reconnaissance missions in Vietnam to pioneering Scrum. Did your military experience influence this making of Scrum?
Definitely, the whole idea of agility for me comes from fighter pilot training, and particularly from John Boyd, whose strategy and approach called the OODA loop is taught in all the war colleges and is the core strategy for the U.S. Marines. So, in my mind, all the concepts around agility and how Scrum works come from fighter pilot training. The theory, I went from the Air Force into medical school, became a professor of radiology, cancer researcher, and all the theory comes out of my research on simulating models of the human cell to try to figure out what causes cancer and how can we prevent it. And that led into really understanding complex adaptive systems theory, which is what Scrum is based on. And the new book I'm writing talks a lot about that.
What was the name of this new book that you're writing?
Yeah, I've just published a new book on leanpub.com. It's called First Principles in Scrum. I noticed that people had trouble being agile because they didn't understand the fundamental principles that make things work. So, for example, in the last decade or so, a guy named Wolfram, who created a product called Mathematica, which became the leading simulation tool for mathematicians and physicists. He's a theoretical physicist, so he said, hey, why can't we use the simulation to simulate how the universe works? So they've been working on that, and to their surprise, all the theories in physics emerge out of even more fundamental principles. And the most fundamental one of all is that in order to calculate a result in a complex system, it requires infinite computing power. And what that means is you can't calculate it. It means the universe is unpredictable. So the reason I created Scrum is because in project management, they came up with this tool before World War I called the Gantt chart, which tries to predict what will happen in a project. And that is used even to this day for traditional project management. And the problem is the investors I work with have never seen a Gantt chart that is correct ever in 30 years of being CEOs of companies, investors in companies. The entire investment group I work with, 8 or 10 really senior investors, they're in board meetings multiple times a month. They're always presented Gantt charts. They're always trying to calculate when is the company going to need more money, how much more are they going to need? And they say they can never make the calculation because the Gantt charts are 100% wrong 100% of the time. So this is why we have such incredible mammoth projects that crash and burn. We have one of them, one of the many in the book we call Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. the FBI was tasked after COVID to create a system could track a terrorist. Initially, they had a project for $180 million. That failed. Then they got another $450 million from the government. And after several years with hundreds of people working on it, they spent $400 million. And then the government accounting office shut it down because it didn't work. They were using traditional project management. So the FBI said Congress passed a law 10 years ago that said we had to do this. We have to figure out a way. So what they did was they put 30 people in the basement of the FBI building doing Scrum. And about a year later, they had the system that runs the FBI today. So think about that. 30 people 1 year to produce the system that runs the FBI, almost $600 million for hundreds of people for many years, produce nothing, complete waste. How much better is Scrum than traditional project management? In that case, it's infinitely better because when you spend 600 million and you get nothing, and when you spend 50 million and you get everything, you are infinitely better. Okay. So the world of project management is a really crazy place based on the idea that you could actually predict a project. But when you go down to the fundamental principles of physics, you find it's unpredictable. So people are trying to do is like violate the law of gravity. You know, trying to predict a project is like trying to jump off a cliff without getting hurt, right? Unfortunately, most of the people that jump off a cliff get hurt. And most of the people that use traditional project management with Gantt charts get hurt. So my message for the last 30 years has been, stop doing that. So that's what Scrum is all about, saving people from crashing and burning. And you know, we met with the leading process engineers in chemical plants in the early days of Scrum. And they said, we were hired by DuPont to find out why chemical plants blow up. Okay. So maybe some of you still remember Bhopal, if you're old enough, a plant that blew up and killed thousands of people. And they said, every time a plant blew up, they had a project plan that was trying to predict a predictive control system. They're trying to predict a system that has a lot of variability. And when you try to use a predictive control system on systems that have a high variability, the chemical plant blows up. So we're not just talking about wasting money, we're talking about killing thousands of people by doing the wrong thing that's a direct violation of the fundamental principles of physics, okay? So these experts said to Ken Schwaber, my partner, you need to change the whole project management industry to use an empirical control system, inspect and adapt, an agile system, or your projects are all going to continue to blow up. So that's what we've done. We've rescued projects from massive failure.
When you speak about Agile and the Agile manifesto that you co-authored in 2001, this had a profound impact in project management. Now, how do you see these principles evolving and adapting in the work of technology in the context of like AI or AR and robotics?
Okay, well, Scrum emerged out of AI. This is another reason I wrote my book. Okay, so the fundamental principle below relativity and quantum mechanics is that the universe is unpredictable. It's called computational irreducibility, since it takes infinite computing power to predict what's going to happen. It's not predictable in a finite universe. When you go up into biology, Scrum is based on, I was a research scientist modeling the human cell. I had about $30 million from the National Institute grant, a huge grant for many, many, many years. When you start modeling the human cell, you learn about biology and you learn about how biological systems inspect and adapt, how they're agile, right? A biological system, the most adaptive systems survive, and the ones that can't adapt, they're extinct, okay? So when you look at biology and you start to simulate that on the computer, you get a whole massive theory called complex adaptive systems, which Scrum is directly based on. How do complex systems work? How does your body work? You are a complex adaptive system. A team is a complex adaptive system. A business is a complex adaptive system. How do these work? Well, they have a set of interacting agents that are running independently, autonomously, and they're collaborating together to achieve a goal. So the computer simulations of life have shown us how you survive in an unpredictable universe. Scrum is a framework so that you can actually implement complex adaptive systems theory without having to be a scientist. Scrum is very simple. Now, where did the Agile Manifesto come from? It came from Scrum guys and extreme programming, another lightweight process, along with 10 consultants and authors sitting down and saying, what commonalities do we have for these processes that inspect and adapt? And we wrote the 4 Agile values and the 12 Agile principles. These are very high level things that try to describe what is much more fundamental, which is complex adaptive systems, which is a simulation of biological organisms, which are based on physics and chemistry and are inspecting and adapting all the time. So all of this is linked, from the most basic fundamental principles of the universe, learning how to inspect and adapt and survive in an unpredictable universe. That's created biology. That's created complex adaptive systems. That's created Scrum. And Agile Manifesto is just a poster about all of that.
So,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So Scrum emphasizes the importance of cross-functional teams. I was wondering if you could share an example of how diverse skill sets within the team have led towards like innovative breakthroughs.
Okay, well, have you ever noticed that your iPhone apps get updated almost every week or two? What do you think? What kind of process do you think their people are using?
Scrum.
Yeah, I was training. I had some Apple developers, and Scrum training, and one of them said, Jeff, do you know why Apple always meets its states and brings out great new products? I said, no, why? They said, because they do Scrum by the book. And so I was really interested. What book are they using? They said the red book, the book that's behind me, Scrum the Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. So I would say every major breakthrough today is driven by an agile process. They may not call it Scrum, but it's an agile process that's reflecting the Agile Manifesto. And the most agile company in the world today is Tesla. And they're producing cars with this kind of inspect and adapt process.
So, Scrum has been widely adapted in the tech and startup world. How do you envision its application within non-traditional tech companies? And what benefits could they expect, like the energy industry?
Okay, so some of our biggest and best customers are actually the oil industry, British Petroleum, Shell. They're using massive numbers of Scrum teams. Let me give you one example. A South American oil company, oil and gas, was doing exploration. And they said, it takes us an average of 30 days to dig a well. What if we use Scrum? So they implemented Scrum, and then the average time to dig went to 6 days. So that means they can drill, 4 or 5 times as many wells in the same amount of time. That's a pretty big difference. So Scrum applies to every industry and every practice because it's based on physics. It's based on the science of biological evolution. And it's based on understanding that projects are unpredictable. So when they're out doing the oil wells, they can't predict that a truck is going to get stuck in the jungle, in the mud, with a bunch of pipe, and it's going to take 3 weeks to get the truck out of the mud to get to the well site. You can't predict that. But when they implemented Scrum, the management got together every morning and said, what happened yesterday that was unpredictable, and how are we going to fix it immediately? And they started drilling wells 4 or 5 times faster, right? So this is a really simple concept. Have you noticed things change every day? Do you change your behavior every day? You have to be, to be successful. But we have many old companies and old businesses that don't change what they're doing every day. They have a budget for a year, and then they just follow that budget, and you can't do any plan that's not in the budget, and everything changes. Change used to be slower, but there's so many new technology emerging so fast. Change is 10 times fast. Maybe now with AI, it's probably going to be 100 times faster. So all these old businesses, they're going to go bankrupt. So every business today in any domain has to go faster, has to change quicker. And if they don't, they will be out of business. And so that's why you absolutely have to have Agile and Scrum. As the inventor of Scrum, I would say Scrum is the most clearly connected to physics, biology, complex adaptive systems. And that's why it is used in 88% of Agile companies.
So would you say that would be the advice you would give leaders or organizations looking to foster this culture of continuous improvement, adaptability, similar?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So then what do you believe the future holds for Scrum and Agile methodologies? Are there any emerging trends or technologies that are influencing its evolution?
Well, I think what's the most visible company today that's changing things is Tesla. Tesla is worth 4 times as much as Toyota, which is formerly the best car company in the world. Their Model Y sells more cars than the most sales of the Tesla Corolla, which is now the number 2 selling car in the world. And they make 20 changes, more than 20 hardware and software changes on the assembly line as the car is moving every week. And the traditional car vendors have made about 1 a year. So Tesla is 1,000 times faster than the traditional auto companies. What do you think is going to happen to the traditional auto companies?
They're going to be left in the dust.
Absolutely. They already are sucking dust. Their sales are already going down. And Tesla's sales are doing nothing but go up. And so the only question is how long before most of them just go bankrupt.
So then what would they have to do? They would have to adapt this methodology for them to succeed then.
Yeah. And some of them are already adapting. You know, like Tesla said, why can't we produce a car like a toy car? You just stamp it and then the whole car is done, right? So they started doing that. Well, just this week, Toyota said they're doing it for one of their electric cars. They're not in production yet, but so every car manufacturer is going to have to, number one, go to stamping a car so you can get, in less than a second, you can get huge pieces of a car that are complete. Second, all cars need to be updated over the internet. And the only car company that can do it completely is Tesla. And all the software cars needs to work together. Right now, the traditional vendors have like 100 parts of the car made by other companies. They all have their own software, and the software doesn't really talk to one another very well. So Tesla builds like a car it's a computer on wheels with one operating system running everything in the car. And BMW, for example, has about 100 different parts with 100 different operating systems and the software just does not work well and cannot compete with Tesla. So this Agile thing is not just nice to have, it's about survival. And as a result, most companies in the world today are trying to transform their companies to be more agile.
Then with that, Jeff, with this lifelong dedication to promoting Scrum and Agile, what motivates you to continue to advocate for these principles And then what legacy do you hope to leave in the world of agile management?
Well, on the project area, the legacy is already done. It is absolutely clear that everything's going to go completely agile. Now, one of the very interesting things, there's a great book called Superabundance, where a few professors looked at what is the cost of everything back in 1980 compared to today. And to compare the costs is difficult because inflation, rates. So they said, we're going to make everything calculated by the number of hours you have to work to buy it. Okay, so how many hours does it take to get enough money to get a car or stove in 1980 compared to 2023? And what they found was, on the average, everything cost about 72% less in terms of the number of hours you have to work to get it. And except for two things, education and healthcare. So my goal now is to take the Scrum engine that we've used to change project management and apply that in healthcare, because I have so many years of experience. I had over a decade as a medical school professor. Even when I went to industry and was implementing Scrum, I was CTO of two major healthcare companies for, again, more than a decade. And I've had a research laboratory since 1980. So my background is in research, medicine. And so now most of my time I'm spending now with a healthcare startup. So think about healthcare now. You know, you call up your doctor or you try to get an appointment. It might take you 3 weeks, right? Then he gives you, then the doctor does a couple of lab tests and gives you a pill. And then you don't hear from him. He doesn't really follow up, right? Maybe you go back and see him because the pill didn't fix what the problem was. Maybe you get a physical every year, maybe not, right? What if we could, using advanced technology, put you on a scanner where we scan you every week, your entire body, every cell in the body, all the way down to the DNA? What if we're able to list anything's wrong, any allergens, any bacteria, viruses, any drugs that might help you? And what if we can treat you for that like every week? And if you're really sick, we just do that every day. And what if we put a monitor on your body like I have on my Garmin watch? It's measuring you 1,000 times a second. It tells exactly all your physical parameters 1,000 times a second. And when we scan and then treat you, we're watching your watch. So we know whether that worked within the hour of the day. And what if the cost of that was 10% of your current healthcare cost, and the results were more than 10 times as effective? Do you think you'd try the new way of working or stick with the old system?
Definitely the new way.
It's amazing how many people, they can't believe that actually the new way is here. And they will stick with the old way, even though it's not working. People have such a difficult time changing. That's why Agile is so important for everybody, both not just businesses, but personally, for your own health and well-being and your own success. You have to be an Agile person today. You have to wake up in the morning and ask yourself the question, how can I learn something new today and be a better person today than I was yesterday? You have to ask, what changed in my world since yesterday, and how am I going to act differently? You have to do that every day. And now if we pair a healthcare system to you where you got a whole healthcare scanning treatment protocol working with you, what you get is I'm building a Scrum framework for healthcare. I called it twice the energy with half the stress. Because it turns out both for Agile Scrum teams and Agile people, in order to be effective, they need more energy and less stress. And if they have more energy and less stress, it's easy for you to get twice the work in half the time. What if you could do twice as much as you're doing every day in half the time you're doing it? And so half your day is just having fun. I mean, think about this if you're a student. Suppose you could work half the week and get twice the grades of the other people in your class. Would that be better?
Yeah, definitely.
If you had twice the energy and half the stress, you could do that. Now, energy, the beauty of the watch I have on is that it has analytics in it from a Finnish company that are used to train Olympic athletes. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's a line across the top called body battery. And blue line.
Yeah, I see that.
And it's running, my energy is running over 80%. And my stress, it's going up a little bit as I'm talking to you because I'm energized. But you can see most of the time my stress is down below 20%.
Wow.
If I put this watch on you, I guarantee your watch will not look like that. Your energy will be dropping, your stress will be high. But if you apply the healthcare framework I'm talking about, you feel great. I mean, if in some days I can wind up at the end of the day with as much energy as I have now. And with stress as low as it is now. And when your energy is running at 80% all the time, and your stress is below 20, it's called the rest state. That's what you expect. You have the amount of stress that you have when you sleep, right? Your energy is off the chart. You just have a lot more fun. I mean, I'm having fun talking to you right now.
I mean, yeah, it sounds remarkable.
And I could do this all day. And I could be having as much fun at 5 o'clock as I'm having right now because my is 80%, my stress is below 20%. So I have a company that is teaching people how to do this, right? So we're taking, how do you manage an oil company? And we're taking it right down to you personally. How do you manage you, right? So that you have awesome performance, you have awesome feeling great, and half the time to have fun, even if you have to work half the time. So it's a better life, right? Scrum brings better life.
So with that then, Jeff, if there's one quote you could end on, maybe something that's sort of been resonating with you recently.
Well, I've been writing a lot about the fourth principle in the Agile Manifesto, respond to change over following a plan. That's kind of at the root of the fundamental principles that drive physics. And it's at the root of being a better person, where every day you need to get up and say, what happened and what's different today, and how am I going to respond differently and be a better person today than I was yesterday. And so that's what drives continuous improvement, and not only makes your business work a lot better, but makes you personally a lot more effective as an individual. So respond to change over following a plan. It's the fourth value in the Agile Manifesto.